Dick Kane here. In this video, I would like to introduce you to some of the features of my set of 27 scripts which assist with all the details in layout and sizing of objects, rectangular objects in InDesign spreads. So the objects we can deal with are rectangles, which can be frames, empty frames, frames that include pictures, frames that include text, and groups, which can be made of various things. Groups can't be resized, but the others can be. So to start out, let's look at the screen here where we have one spread shown. You can see there's a gray border around the outside showing the limits of the spread. The default condition in my scripts is that, because I started doing this while I was making books, which I'm continuing to do, is that this spread shows two facing pages. In order to define how that works, the first thing we have to do is establish the margins. So first we go over and activate the scripts panel, and so here you see my scripts, of which there are 27. As I said, many of those are actually management things, like deleting a parameter here and deleting a preset here, for example, and exporting and importing presets. So they're management kinds of things, but they're not the kinds of things that you would normally be using as you're doing layouts, unless you're going off into management mode. Okay, so the margins stuff is right up here at the top. We have two margins possibilities, set for the document and set for this spread. So we'll illustrate this by setting for the spread. If you do set margins for a spread, that overrides whatever the margins might be for the document. But then you can also, if we move this up a notch, you can also clear the margins for the spread so that you can undo that override if you need to at a later date. So this is quite comprehensive. So let's double click to activate a script in InDesign. So we'll double click on this, and we didn't select an object. We need to select an object, because if you don't select an object, InDesign can't know what spread you're talking about. So we say, okay, we'll select an object, which is this picture here, and now we can go and say set for the spread, and you see we get a user interface in which we have the definition of the margins, the top margin for both the left and right pages, the bottom margin for both the left and right pages, and for each page, the left page here and the right page down below, we have the left margin and the right margin. Because usually you want to do the symmetric things, then I programmed the default, which is if you set the margins of the right-hand page to 0, you will get symmetric margins. You can make a preset about these settings by putting a name of a preset down here, which can contain almost anything but not spaces and not double quotes. Okay, we don't have any presets set. If we did, there would be an option up here on the top to load a preset from a drop-down list. So to illustrate what happens in all of these scripts pretty much is that you get approval questions. So if we say OK to this, I'll just leave these as they are, you will see a selection here which is illustrating the margins for the left page. And if we say OK to this, we will then see the margins for the right page. And if we say OK to this, we will be all set to continue with our project. If we cancel, then this is all forgotten, but of course we didn't change anything, so it doesn't really make any difference. I should note that this looks like there's a frame in the document, but that's not true. This is a temporary frame which goes away when this script ends. So this is not adding to the burden of your document. Okay, so if we click OK and get out of here, now we've got two pages defined, and we can talk about what we want to do with these pictures. So we have two pictures here, one of a doorway and one of a interior of this log cabin down in Illinois that I photographed many years ago. Okay, now, if we want to talk about how these things relate to each other, we have a problem in InDesign because InDesign only lets you talk about one thing at a time. If I select this image, if I double select it so I get the double frame, I can move it around, but I can't relate it to other things because I have no way of talking about them. So I've put in these scripts the capability to give names, which I call identifiers, or names, kind of interchangeably, to the elements of the spread. So you can do this by parameters down here about setting identifier or showing identifier. If you show them, it just shows you what it is, but if you set it, then you are allowed to give it a name. So if we double click on set identifier, then we get a block where we can edit box where we can put in. So let's just call this inside. So we'll just type in here inside, like so. I'm not a fast typist, and say OK. So now this is called inside. If I double click on this again, it will show me that it is called inside, and I can cancel, for example, and be all set. In a similar way, I can go to double click on this, double click on here, and let's call this doorway. So doorway. Yeah, okay. So now we have the possibility of talking about how is inside related to doorway. For example, I could say let's put doorway up next to inside and put it up in here somewhere. Let's just move it over here and say, okay, we want it somewhere up here, and we want the details to be taken care of. So the way we do that is by the large script here, which is relationships set for an item. I made this narrow so it suppress the word. Anyhow, the relationship set for an item. So if I double click on this, I will get a very large user interface dialog box, which has some stuff in it which came from before. So let's clean this out and just say that this is unchanged and this is unchanged. And so this is the look that you would get, except for there must be some presets because this asks if I want to load a preset. But this would be what you would get with respect to an object which you have just imported or brought into InDesign. So what we want to do, for example, is we'll say we want this location, this object, which is the doorway, to be next to the inside. So we want this to be location to be based on the margins of the item named inside. Now, where do we want to put it? Well, let's say we put it right here next to it. So we can talk about what we're lining up by looking at this drop-down list, which talks about the 9 key parts of a rectangle. The 4 sides, top, bottom, left side, right side, the 4 corners, and the center. You can use any one of these 9 as the point which will relate to a point on the other one. So let's say we're going to make the upper right corner of this match up to the upper left corner of that. So we can say, okay, upper right corner of this will be next to the upper left corner of the first item, which is the inside. And we have the option of offsets. This had a number in it, but let's get rid of that. It would come up 0 normally. And the item size will not change, and if we say OK, then presto, the object moves up here, and I have the option, as I did with the margins, and as I do with anything that changes the layout, I get an option to cancel, which will undo the whole thing, or to say OK, in which case I have this result. Now if I look at this, if I take the border off, this is a very confusing thing because the pictures are too close together and one merges into the other, and it requires a little bit of brain work to figure out what's going on. So we go back here, say that didn't quite work. Oh, we forgot to do an object again. We're dealing with this object, Remember, I unselected it so that we could see what was going on. So if we double click over here on the relationships, now we can have we can push it to the side to make a space in here by having a horizontal offset. And the offsets work in the directions of graph paper in school, and when you graphed in mathematics. So horizontally, positive goes to the right, vertically, positive goes up. If we want, we're talking now about where is the doorway in relation to inside, so we want a negative number in the horizontal place. So let's say -10 and or 15 and see what happens. The units here are picas because that is the underlying built-in unit of measurement inside InDesign. So I just kept it all in picas. There are other options which we'll discuss in other videos about how you talk about these things. So if we say that, now the other thing we might want to do is make this be the same height so they are more compatible with each other. And we can do that down here because the second part, the third part, the first part is presets, the second part is location, the third part is size, and the fourth part is establishing a preset. So the size of the doorway picture could be based on the height, because we're going to match heights. So the height up here, the height of this can match one. There's several options here. Page margins, the first item named above, an image named, and a space between that we'll not talk about in this video because that's more complicated. So if we just say select the first image named above like this, then we say OK. What will we have? We have it move over and get to be as big. You see how fast that happened and how magical that happened. No details that you have to worry about at all. So if we accept this arrangement, we click OK, and now we have a nice arrangement of our two images. Now the other thing that we can do here is, you see, if I go back in here again, let's select this. So if I select this and go back in here, I can change these numbers. I can give it an offset. Let's say -30, just for whatever, and leave everything else the same and say OK, and it will move down just like that. So you see this happens quickly, rapidly, and without much thought. Okay, now the other thing you can do, which is quite useful, is make snapshots, collect snapshots of what you did. So if we go back here, let's go back here and undo this -30, for example, and we'll say OK. So we'll pop that back up and say OK. Now we can save a snapshot, double click on saving a snapshot, and it says, what do you want to name the snapshot? So let's call it door 1. And you can have you can name it anything you want, but don't use double quotes. Okay, so if I say OK, then I've got that as a snapshot. Now if I go back again and do our relationships set for the item and put in my downward motion, put in my -30 over here again to illustrate this, and say OK, and then we click OK here, and then we can now make a snapshot of this and say this is door 2. I've forgotten what I said before, so we'll just say door 2. Okay, now just to illustrate how you can use these, you can now go pick the revert to the snapshot, double click on this, and you've got the names of your snapshots here in an alphabetical list. Okay, so we have door 1, door 2, and then we have some other things. So if we click on door 1 and say OK, we're popped back to door 1. And then if we revert to and we pick door 2, then we're back to door 2, just like that. So this is a useful technique, and you notice you can have an unlimited number of these snapshots because you can give them arbitrary names and they will all be collected up. So this video, purpose of this video was to illustrate the possibilities and give you a teaser about the possibilities that are in my 27 scripts. And so please look at some of the other scripts. These scripts are available in the Adobe Exchange, and the URL of that will be showing at the bottom at the end of this. So thank you for listening. Have fun and be creative, and don't fuss the details, because my scripts will do that for you. Thank you.